Hello, all. Thanks for joining us today, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live session discussing an important topic, software engineering metrics that matter. So my name is Ashley Dye, and I'm a principal consultant here at Thoughtworks. I will be your moderator today. I'm also joined by our experts in the field, Chris Westerhold, who is the Engineering Excellence Global Practice Director from Thoughtworks, Nathan Harvey, who leads the DORA team at Google Cloud, and Justin Riak, who is the Deputy CTO of DX. But I'm actually going to let the experts here introduce themselves. So Justin, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. Justin Riak here, Deputy CTO at DX. I've been here for going on almost a year now, but I've been deeply immersed in developer experience and productivity theory and measurement and research for almost a decade. My background is in software development. I spent a long time writing code, but really the focus lately has been more around developer experience and productivity.
Thanks so much, Justin. Nathan?
Hey, Ashley, good to see you again. Thanks so much for having me. And hi, everyone. I'm Nathan Harvey. I lead up the DORA team here at Google Cloud. DORA is a research program that's been running for over a decade that looks into all kinds of things, but mainly how do technology-driven teams and organizations improve? And of course, that all starts with developer experience. So I'm really excited to be joining this panel today to talk about exactly
Thanks, Nathan. Chris?
Hey, everybody. Chris Westerhold, Global Practice Director for our AI-first software engineering transformation offering. And one of the big pieces of that is really engineering insights. And how do you take all of this, metrics and then turn that into the realization of value? And yeah, really looking forward to kicking this off and having a great conversation.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. So today's session, as we've talked, is really how meaningful metrics can drive significant outcomes in software engineering. So we'll be diving into metric strategies, best practices, industry trends in this space, but we'll be covering three major areas. So when we think about this, that first piece, measurement, is just a means to an end. The goal is to actually drive impact. We're hearing a lot in the industry, folks are saying, I'm adopting AI, but how do I get there to drive meaningful engineering outcomes that actually translate into business impact? The second is, how do you measure what matters? It's not simply, what's easy to instrument, but how do you identify the metrics that matter? The third is that challenge of vanity metrics. So ones that are not actionable, really getting to a place where you can actually, leverage a data-driven strategy that enables action to drive that impact you'd identified as a goal for your business. So I also do want to mention that Thoughtworks is a platinum sponsor of the forthcoming 2025 DORA report that will be launching late September. And also, before we get started, some housekeeping items. Folks that are listening in today can actually, ask questions of the panel using the chat, and we will have time at the end to answer these. So feel free to continue to ask as we move along through the session. So to get started, we're actually going to start with some quick fire questions here to our panelists. And I'm going to start with Nathan. So Nathan, as someone deeply connected to DORA metrics, what's your favorite way to explain their importance in just one sentence?
Great question, Ashley. I would say that first, I'm glad that you know about the DORA metrics, and just remember that DORA is a whole body of research that goes well beyond the metrics. With that in mind, though, these metrics really look at the system outcomes and give us a good way to sort of step on the scale to understand how are we doing today, and then we can use those to help us identify areas where we want to improve.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. That makes perfect sense. Justin, you're next. So if you had to pick just one quality that great engineering cultures share, what would it be?
This is so hard because there are really multiple qualities that kind of converge together. But I think I'll probably steal from Google's Project Aristotle, where they determined that the number one factor really predicting the best outcomes for engineering teams was psychological safety. In other words, being measured by the right things and feeling like you have the ability to experiment and take chances to drive innovation within the organization. But there's a lot of nuance to building psychologically safe culture in engineering teams.
Psychologically safe. I like it. All right. Chris, over to you. So at Thoughtworks, you've worked with engineering teams globally. What's one word you'd use to describe an effective engineering metric?
I would have to go with actionable. I've seen a lot of organizations, and I don't know if people, I don't believe a lot of people are doing this on purpose, but metrics can be leveraged like a sledgehammer, and just to be used as just to go faster, go faster, go faster. Well, that's actually not very actionable. And in the end, like, you can really cause some, very serious cultural problems and everything inside of an organization, to Justin's point around psychological safety. But if you start to think about metrics and how you're using them, what are you actually trying to do, and the incentives you're putting in place, like, that's really what, kind of good looks like when you're thinking about metrics.
That makes a lot of sense. I know we talked about that at the beginning, and I'm sure we'll dive a bit deeper into, all three of these areas, from outcomes to psychological safety to actionable outcomes, and some examples of what we see in the industry. So if we can go into a bit deeper here, these next series of questions will kind of have everyone, all of y'all on the panelist side, kind of give some commentary. The first question is, metrics are, most effective when they align with specific roles within an organization. So how can engineering teams, leadership, CXOs collaborate to actually determine the right metrics for their unique priorities? If you could each, share some examples of how role-specific metrics like DORA metrics for engineers or speed and cost metrics for executives, have driven meaningful outcomes. And why don't we start with Nathan?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Ashley. So I think that this is a really interesting question, because anytime you talk about metrics, there's always a question of who are these metrics for? And I think that really, when we think about things like the DORA metrics, which help us measure software delivery performance, I always argue that these are really for the team that comes together to build and deliver and operate that software that is being measured. These aren't necessarily metrics that you want to roll up to your executives. As an example, I don't know of many CEOs who have asked, how many times did we deploy this year? It's not really a question that's top of mind for most CEOs. They care more about things like, how's the business going? What's our customer experience like? What do sales and revenue look like? How are we driving those through down to the bottom line? Now, within an engineering organization, something like customer satisfaction might feel like it's rather distant to what you have control over in your daily work. And so I think that it's really important to think about, how do I, as an engineer, connect to those users, connect to those customer outcomes that we care about? The biggest sort of lever that I have is probably shipping some software. And so maybe that helps me start to connect. Hey, if I can ship software more frequently and ship it safer, then I have a better chance of building something that our customers are going to love, and maybe even learning from those customers as I ship software. There is a saying that we've used a lot around the industry: you ship to learn. We have to ship the software to learn how are customers going to react to that. Are they going to use that new feature? Is it going to help them accomplish what they're after? And so I think, as an engineer, understanding that we have certain levers or knobs and dials that we can adjust, but those are all really adjusting so that we can achieve some outcome, whether it's a business metric that we really care about or a customer outcome that we really care about. And so connecting that work together really helps. And I contrast this with, maybe some engineering teams who, as Chris said, like, go faster, go faster, go faster. Like the engineering teams that come into work and there's a pile of stories or a backlog of tickets that they need to take. They take the ticket, they get it done in some shape, and then they ship it on and they move on to the next ticket. These types of engineering teams aren't necessarily connected to the customers in the way that you want. And so while they may be able to build things quickly, they may not be building the right things or have any understanding of where does their role fit in the larger picture. And I think that metrics can really help us sort of articulate that and really understand and make those connections. So I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I kind of hear the allusion to transparency as well, right?
Yeah.
Right. Makes sense. Justin, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, completely agree. You have to think about like the full value stream that's involved in shipping software, like the process of software engineering and building software goes well beyond, writing code, and certainly beyond what I think we would commonly describe as like the developer experience, which is of course a very important part of that value stream, but it's not the only part. And in fact, if you look, at DevOps, and if you look at Dora, and if you look at some of those specific metrics, these metrics are really more about, to Nathan's point, like, shipping software than creating it and then maintaining that software. When we look at mean time to resolve metrics and stuff, these are metrics that are going to, point more to SRE and DevOps and production supporting roles than they are, creating software. That said, I think that there's two ways to look at this, and I think Nathan was alluding to this as well. There's who do we measure and what do we measure? That's one question that we have to answer. The other one, though, is who are these metrics for, right? And I think that to Nathan's point, and I would echo a lot of what you hear, coming from like Max Kanat-Alexander, who was developer experience at Google and then developer productivity and happiness at LinkedIn, and is now helping Capital One with their developer experience. He was the one who really taught me this perspective of, the audience matters more than the data, right? If you can't comfortably answer like who's going to be upset, whose decision-making process will be paralyzed if this data is out of date or stale or unavailable for some reason, then if you really can't comfortably sort of answer that, then there's really not a point to collecting the metric in the first place. And then it just goes on a dashboard and we all look at it and we're like, oh, that's a pretty graph, but we don't do anything with it, right? So this data, in organizations that become highly data-driven is like the fulcrum for decision-making across multiple roles in the organization. And I think it's interesting too that, we started with Dora and had this great framework for just kind of looking at overall engineering health. The Dora metrics are so brilliant because each of them tells really dozens of individual stories about how things operate in the business. Like we can talk about deployment frequency, but it's not so much, oh, we deployed 200 times a day or we have to deploy 200 times a day. It's that we can deploy 200 times a day. And fundamentally, the engineering health and culture of an organization that can do that versus deploying every week or 2 weeks or every month is much different. There's all these bits of flexibility and agility in the process that exist to support that very high capability to deploy frequently. The same with time to resolve, right? How easy is it to trace issues? How easy is it to get to the knowledge that we need to solve these problems? How easy is it to track down the right dependencies, whether system dependencies or human dependencies that we need to debug? And so again, this is one metric that's spanning multiple roles and combined responsibilities in the organization. But then we moved further into this world of like space framework and platform engineering now, which has, combines a lot of what we've learned from DevOps with the discipline of understanding developer experience. And it's interesting to me that these metrics that are more about the internal value stream of a software engineer creating code came later, right? They came later in the discussion. And so I think that when we look at these metrics across multiple roles, that's just the realities of kind of how we've learned to measure organizations in the full value stream over the last decade to 15 years. And we know specifically like Pfizer has been very public about, using the DX platform to measure many areas of the value stream beyond just software creation. And they say that they're saving about 5 million a year now as a result of improved processes and better workflows across the organization. So highly impactful when we take that more whole picture of the organization.
That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. And being able to quantify that, that type of savings over the course of time is certainly an impact that you can translate in a lot of different ways to allocation within the organization's business, right? So I think that makes a ton of sense. Chris, please, your commentary.
Yeah, I would, to take this up a little bit of a level more towards kind of that CXO view, but, what is it that you want to be as an organization? Or where is your product or set of products in their maturity, kind of the maturity curve, right? Like if you're an early startup, you care about speed and you care about cost because you don't have a lot of money and you need to move fast to find product market fit. So you're willing to sacrifice quality, essentially. Well, as you mature as a product or as you mature as an organization, you're going to become a little, more focused on quality as you start to get that more mature base those kinds of things. Like, so where are you and where do you sit in there? What are the metrics that you care about that are going to help you get to that goal? Because if you're constantly just saying faster, 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 like I said a minute ago, and you build your metrics around that, that's what you're incentivizing people to do. And so as a leader, you're setting the values and the culture of what you expect from the people below you. And so if that's the North Star that you're setting, and whether it's actually improving your org or not, hey, we can deploy 5 times a day. Well, that actually might not be good for you. If there are a number of SaaS products that I work with that seem to deploy all the time and things just move all over the place and I can't remember how to use them. And so, like, are you actually impacting your end user in a negative way or not? But a lot of that comes from the top and needs to work their way down.
That makes a lot of sense. Would you kind of double click on that when you think of that top down and bottoms up approach to expand a bit further?
Yeah, it's like if you look at the different kind of companies that are out there, right? Not to speak for Google because Nathan's here, but they tend to be around speed and experimentation, get stuff out there, see what works, and then move on if it doesn't. There's other folks that are, LinkedIn's more focused on happiness, and they think that they have a good developer experience and better developers write better code, right? Like that's just a really good, it's the culture everyone talks about, and it's what people try to set, but it's actually what they set by their actions. And so that has a serious impact on how you actually do things at the ground level. And all of that stuff plays together. And if you're not thinking about how that impacts all of your teams, you're not doing it correctly, because it all ties together into this package. And it's not just the DORA metrics. It's not just any of one set of metrics. It's holistically, and how do you actually operationalize that in a way that's not metrics theater.
Yeah, and I think just to layer in on top of that, we talk about developer experience and developer productivity, and as an executive, we want better developer productivity. We want better productivity out of every role and every department within our organization. And how do you get there? Is it true that happy developers are more productive, or are more productive developers happier? Like which way does this equation go? And I think the answer is yes, that both are true. And one of the quickest ways to deteriorate your developer experience while also driving down your productivity is add a lot of friction to the process, add a lot of friction to maybe the approval process for how do I get a change out into production, add a lot of friction for how do I learn lessons from the things that I've shipped. Chris, you mentioned, experimentation. Yeah, it's great that we want to experiment. And I think we even had a commenter, Brian, who said, moving fast is one thing. We want to be able to do that, but we also want to ship the right things. We want to do both. We have to be able to move quickly and ship the right things. And sometimes we don't know if it's the right thing until we ship it, but we still have to prioritize both of these things. And we want to ship to learn, as I said earlier. And so this idea that the way to improve developer productivity is also, it's the same way that you're going to improve the developer experience. And that, I think, is the magical combination here. You're reducing friction. You're making the lives of your developers easier, because frankly, everyone that shows up to work, but all right, maybe not quite everyone. The large majority of people that show up to work show up because they want to do a good job. They want to feel connected to the work. They want to feel like the work that they're doing matters, and it delivers real value, both to themselves and to the people that they're building things for. And so I think it's really important that we take that holistic look and understand, where are the friction points? What are the frictions that we can eliminate? What are some of the friction points that we can automate? And let's make sure that we have that psychological safety where we can take risks, we can write hypotheses, we can learn from failures, and we can move on and just continually making things, striving for better, I would say.
I would say too that in finding the right audience and being transparent about the data that we're capturing and presenting, and capturing it at the right level, right? Like not zeroing in too much on individual metrics, but looking at team output and stuff like this. All of that leads back to this psychological safety that we know is the greatest predictor of productivity.
Yeah, that I think all amazing points, and thinking about this holistic approach, top down, bottoms up, understanding the friction, being able to translate this to business impact makes a lot of sense. Thanks for your commentary. So we go on to the next question here. Misplaced metrics are often led to unintended consequences, such as gaming outputs or creating counterproductive incentives. Question to the panelists: have you encountered real world examples like the Cobra effect or excessive focus on active users where metrics could cause harm? And what steps can leaders take to ensure metrics drive healthy behaviors and positive results? And I'm going to go to Justin to start on this one.
Thanks. This is actually one of my favorite questions. We talk about the Cobra effect, or you can't, as we say here in the South, swing a dead cat around developer experience without coming across a reference to Goodhart's law, which effectively says the same thing, that when a metric becomes a target, it ceases to be a good metric. This is why it's so important to not over-index on any single metric, right? We have to, and we were talking about this before, these levers of quality and velocity. Those are examples of metrics that are often in tension with one another, right? We sometimes sacrifice quality for speed, or we zero in and perfect becomes the enemy of good, or whatever we want to call it. But we have to strike, the right balance between these two types of metrics. And there's a myriad set of metrics that make quality and velocity like as a single story. But that's why it's so important, again, that we can't just spend too much time, focusing on something like PR throughput, when we know that one metric alone can be manipulated and possibly make the system worse if we're not also paying attention to quality metrics. This has been going on for a long time. I mean, I think Agile was one of the first practices where, okay, we're going to get rewarded based on the number of story points that we can pass through. So we're just going to assign a ton of story points to relatively trivial tasks, and suddenly we're really moving and shaking, but we're not, right? The outcome isn't really any different. We saw the same thing with QA and QA teams early on, where QA teams would be sort of rewarded or incentivized based on the severity, complexity of bugs that they discover. So they just assigned higher complexity and more severity to bugs that were actually possibly trivial, right? And we're seeing it right now with the metrics that we're looking at for AI within an organization. We recently published an AI impact measurement framework. It's the first one out there. It's meant to complement our core 4. And we intentionally are looking across multiple dimensions, right? We want to look at utilization, certainly, but daily active users, weekly active users, that's not enough, especially in organizations where there may be a mandate to use AI tools, which we're starting to see more of. You don't know really, or can't really trust necessarily the telemetry if you're not right there kind of peering over the shoulder of users of these technologies and figuring out, okay, are they just using it for the sake of using it? Or are they just using it because psychologically they don't want their license to get taken away? Maybe they'll figure they have to use it later. Or are they actually impacting? Are they actually more productive? Are they actually creating more and better software as a result of using these tools? So we're seeing this happen right now by looking at too many single utilization metrics. So we look at utilization, impact, and ultimately cost. And we look at how those metrics impact one another. The authors of the SPACE framework are very famous for saying that you must look at a constellation of metrics in tension with one another. And I think that's one of the wisest statements that's been made when it comes to measuring productivity and avoiding things like Goodhart's law.
Thanks, Justin. I think that makes a lot of sense. The balance of the metrics, right, and the right process and framework to get there. Chris.
Yeah, whenever I think about this problem, I always like to the point Justin just made around a constellation of metrics. Like, I always think about it as like, kind of positive and negative metrics. Like, if we do X, I believe that these things are going to happen without these things happening. And, lots of people always want to focus on the positives. Oh, I believe that if we bring in a random AI tool, it's going to make us faster. Well, did it actually cost more? Did it actually save you money? Did you just move the cost from one place to another? Like, you really need to think about And this is how you move away from that like OKR metrics theater, right? You have to be deliberate upfront, thinking about what you actually want to happen and how that's going to impact the people around you. Like we're all going to, I think in the developer experience space, it's easy to come into this with a bias that everything we're going to do is going to have a positive impact. Like you can actually make your developer experience worse. Like it can happen, right? And one of the metrics that I've been kind of like zeroing in on a little bit here recently, talking about some of the AI stuff is like, yeah, you need to be concerned with adoption rates. You need to be concerned with acceptance rates. But the thing I've actually been thinking about is this like cycles required for completion. So, hey, if you've given folks an AI tool, are they cycling back and forth 25 times with this AI chatbot until they get so frustrated that they quit and then they just do it on their own? Like that is a massive waste of time. Or are they spending 3-4 cycles to get what they want, right? Like all of these metrics are directional. And so like every, conversation's not the same. But if you're starting to think about, especially in the agent world where it's like, I'm working with this specific agent, what is this number of cycles required to be able to get to that? Well, but again, you don't want to just focus on that because less is not always better. You need to start thinking about the quality and the outcome and all the rest of it, the other parts of that. And so looking at it holistically, you're going to be able to start to kind of ring fence what you expect to happen and then be able to course correct as you move along.
That makes, I like the analogy there. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's something I'm also hearing folks, as we talk about AI tools and they're starting to implement them and say, okay, I'm going to just enable these folks, but I'm actually not measuring how they're using these tools or how effective they are for them. To your point, Chris, is there more cycle times that they're taking? And are we even seeing an impact? So there's a lot of, stop gaps that I'm seeing with folks in the field that I'm talking to where they're completely, taking a different approach with their strategy from the first part, a few years ago. Nathan, please, I'd love to hear your commentary.
Yeah, I think really to help prevent those unintended consequences, which you started off talking about there, I think it's really important that we create and agree upon these metrics collaboratively. We want to understand like what is it that we're actually trying to move towards and how are these metrics going to tell us our progress towards that goal? Bearing in mind that like just about every measure that we have is a proxy for something else. And so the proxy isn't the real thing, right? The map is not the territory. So we might set some metrics, but let's set those together as a team because we need the buy-in so that we can help prevent that idea of gaming the metrics, which frankly, I think is something that we all worry about more than it actually shows up in practice. But nevertheless, it is a worry. Let's make sure that we have buy-in from the team that's going to be utilizing these measures and that we have agreement on what they are. And then I think the other thing that's super important, Chris talked about, like he didn't use the word, but he laid out a hypothesis for us, right? When we start using measures, we're testing a hypothesis. The only way to test a hypothesis is to pause and reflect. Like, let's see, these numbers have changed. Are we getting the expected outcome that we wanted? And so I think that the three big things for preventing those unintended consequences, one, have clarity of vision and create those metrics together collaboratively. Two, pause and reflect to assess, like, are we actually making progress? And then three, probably the most critical part of a metric for me is it helps us start a conversation. So after that reflection, we have a conversation. Okay, what are we going to do next? Are these measures the right measures? Are we doing the right activities so that we can address or progress these metrics?
I think that's a great point, and it leans really well kind of into this last panelist, roundtable question about actionable insights. So data alone doesn't solve the problems. And to your point, identifying a hypothesis, the vision, creating metrics, collaborative reflection, et cetera. But, data by itself isn't solving these problems, but actionable insights do. So for the panelists here, what strategies and tools can help engineering teams move from just measuring performance to truly understanding how to improve it? Can you all share, a success story where insights from these tools made a significant impact? Nathan, I actually am going to go and start with you.
Okay, sure. I think one of the things that one of the tools, if you will, that I use most when working together with teams is a tool of value stream mapping. Like if we're going to talk about software delivery or actually delivering value of any kind, let's talk about who are the groups of humans that are involved in building and delivering and even operating that value. What are the steps that we have to go through? In the perfect world, we go all the way from idea to a customer saying thank you, or a customer paying you for that idea. Let's map out all of the steps and processes that it takes there. When we do that collectively as a team, I've never done that and had it not uncover some brilliant aha moments where we find maybe a bunch of repetitive work that's happening, or certainly a lot of assumptions that are made from one team to the next as that work kind of moves through the value stream. And so that always helps us identify areas that we can go and improve starting right now. And so that, for me, that's one of my favorite tools to use together with teams.
Yep, absolutely. Value stream mapping, very important. Definitely part of the process for sure. And very valuable.
And add on top of that, Ashley,
Yeah.
is when you think about like value stream, super important. I couldn't agree more. But when it comes to like thinking about the platforms and experiences that you might want to use to fix some of those, you have to do it across the value stream. I see so many people that'll think about like, oh, we've identified metrics, we've done this value stream, and then we're just going to solve like one little part of it without thinking about it in the whole. And it's like, well, yeah, you've kind of made it better, but you really haven't truly solved the problem. And I see this from, oh, we're just going to drop another tool in to help with this. And like, you're actually making the experience worse, even though in some ways you've improved that one little part of the value stream. And so in the end, like the realization of value and like, I know Justin can speak to this with some of the survey results, but like when you ask people like, hey, did this thing help you save time? Yeah, it sure did at this person level. Then you measure it up a little bit at a team level or at an org level. A lot of that value goes away because they're thinking about it less and less of a system. And that individual person is like, yes, it made my life easier, but all of that savings was lost because the value stream wasn't truly enabled in a better way. And so you have to, kind of think about it through that if you're going to get to realizable value at especially an organizational level. And sorry to cut you off.
No, that's perfect. I was going to next. Can you share, a particular, success story of kind of going across the value stream? Double click.
I mean, there's so many of these, like, and everybody's a little bit different, but
sure.
I think you have to listen to your people and you have to understand the waste and friction that they're dealing with, and then make that problem go away. Like, I can't stress that enough. Everybody thinks they know what people's problems are. And then they give them ways of solving a problem without actually validating that it's there. It's like the number one use case for a lot of the AI tools, probably not what you think it is, but it's stack trace analysis. Everybody wants you to use it for code generation and for all of these other things, but there's so many ways that are truly going to provide value. Like incident management's another big one. It's like, hey, not only do we have like a stack trace, we have stuff from 3 or 4 different systems that spit out hundreds of lines of possible errors. Like, how do you take and analyze all of that in a way that makes it easy for the person that needs to understand and to fix the problem? Incidents never happen at 2 p.m. They always happen at 3 o'clock in the morning. So you get paid, you jump out of bed, you go into your computer, you're half asleep, and now you need to be able to function at a high level to understand what the problem is. Well, how do you make that go away? And how do you make it easier for that person to be able to do their job? They probably have a playbook that they're working through to try to fix it. And great, help automate some of that, make that pain go away. And if you think, like, to tie that back to like a DORA metric, your mean time to recover, that is everything to do with the mean time to recover. And if for the average org, if it's costing you $10,000 a minute for an outage, that's a really serious, financial problem. And you're making it easier for developer. Your developer is happier, and all of a sudden you're going to have better levels of productivity. And it had nothing to do with pushing productivity at the beginning. It had everything to do with removing waste and friction, lowering cognitive load to then get to that output.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, and was just coming across something very similar to this, right? Where they went from incident management from 30 minutes down to 2 minutes, right? And equating that to improved customer experience. You said mean time to recover, right? There's different ways you're measuring this, but as you're thinking about the right role or the person in the organization that is impacting, translating that in the most impactful way. Justin, love to hear from you on that.
Yeah, a lot to unpack here, but I mean, the value stream mapping, obviously, big fan as well. But I think, to quote Ellie Goldratt and to kind of validate Chris's point, an hour saved on a non-bottleneck is worthless, right? And I think to Nathan's point, you have to do this collaboratively. You can't just sit down and have one person sort of making assumptions about the way that value flows through the organization, because most of those assumptions are going to be wrong. That's the reason that, to Ellie Goldratt again, the evaporating cloud thinking process is a really great way to eliminate false assumptions in an organization and streamline kind of interaction. So that has to be done collaboratively. You have to have, accuracy. To get this, you need to look at a combination of both qualitative data coming in and quantitative data that's coming either from, like numeric surveying or looking at system metrics and things like that, because you have to provide a full context for the data that you're seeing. And that's, and that's not just, surveying engineers. It's also establishing a really strong customer feedback loop so that we can say, okay, well, our engineering team looks very, very healthy and our quality metrics are great. Why are our customers so unhappy, right? We have to kind of understand like that full picture and that full context. In terms of examples, I mentioned Pfizer, streamlining processes across the entire engineering organization and quantifying that at around a 5 million annual savings. We also have some good use cases where customers have used our platform to identify friction and bottlenecks and to actively and continuously improve those. Dropbox, the CEO of Dropbox is very public about how they really had no visibility kind of into their full value stream before starting to measure some of these things and model it the right way. And now it's completely changed the culture of the business and improved the culture of the business and the agility and flexibility of the engineering team. Booking.com, very similar public examples of this as well, where they've been able to accelerate their cycle times while not hurting overall quality of what it is that they're delivering. So I think Chris is right. I mean, there are like dozens and dozens and dozens of cases. But I would say I really think of whether an organization has put together an accurate value stream map is a real yardstick of their maturity, right? A business like that is just going to see better outcomes. But yeah, you can look for all kinds of examples for this. But key takeaways: make sure that it's not one person just sort of assuming what the value stream looks like. Make sure that this is a collaborative discussion between multiple leaders and people who understand the operations of the business. Because to Nathan's point, you will come across assumptions that are wrong. You'll come across duplicated work. You'll come across all these inefficiencies in just going through and doing this. Like you'll be in a conversation and say, okay, well, this ticket gets answered by this part of the org, and then we go and we hit this container instance and we use our traceability to fix this, and then someone will raise their hand and be like, oh, no, there's like 10 other steps that we have to go through for this, we have to go and hit these other 5 dependencies, and all of a sudden you're looking at the real complexity of the organization, which allows you and informs your decisions in where you need to focus. Where is the true bottleneck that we should focus on improving, not just one person's problem and not just the loudest voice in the room.
Yeah, I think they're all great points. They all kind of complement each other to think about that, again, holistic strategy here. So where we are right now, we're going to go to some questions that the audience has. And so continue to submit your questions. We're going to aim to answer as many as we possibly can. However, if we do run out of time, we will plan to answer the questions, after the live webinar via the event chart in LinkedIn. So continue to ask your questions. And again, we'll work our best to get them answered. But one of the questions that has come across here is, I'm going to read this out. So I appreciate the value of DORA metrics, especially in identifying bottlenecks and improving delivery. However, I noticed a challenge, and this challenge is when senior developers are responsible for unblocking others, handling cross-team dependencies, or managing multiple priorities, they may not be able to progress their own stories as quickly as junior developers. So this can make their individual metrics look less favorable. How does management typically interpret these metrics in such cases, and how can we ensure that the broader impact of senior engineers is recognized? So I maybe does anybody want to volunteer?
I'll jump right in to get us started here. I think Ram, thanks for the question. Second, I think you've pointed out something that was said earlier, but maybe a little bit subtly, and it might have been missed. Justin said this. I think we're not looking at individuals. We aren't measuring individuals. We are measuring at an application level, or at a team level, or at a system level. And I think this is really, really important. And I think, frankly, your question helps identify one of the potential pitfalls that you have when you only look at quantitative data. And the important thing here is that you have to have that mix of quantitative and qualitative data. If I just look at, I don't know, maybe it's the number of story points, I see that my junior developers are delivering more story points than my senior developers. That's only telling me one part of the picture. That's not giving me this comprehensive view into the work that those more senior developers are actually doing day to day to enable those junior developers, to enable the rest of the team, to enable the outcomes that we really care about. And so I think it is always preferred to look at higher level metrics, team level, system level metrics. Those are the ones that really, really matter.
I would also throw in that, how do you start to think about removing some of those dependencies on the more senior developers, right? Like, what are the things that, what are these multiple priorities? What are the other things that they're having to help the junior developers with? Like, how can you make those go away? I would also add, you need to understand your business outcomes and what does that look like? Because another example of this, take a rock star Java developer, and all of a sudden you have a major problem in a different part of your organization that maybe is in Go or whatever, doesn't matter. And you've moved that person from here to that other team, and now they're writing in a language they're not as familiar with. They're supporting people, they're helping other things. Their metrics are probably going to look bad if you look at it at an individual level, but they're actually helping improve a business outcome, which is, hey, this other part of the business is struggling and you need help, and you need someone dynamic enough to go help them. And so, it's very easy to point the finger at developers saying you're not going fast enough. But a lot of the times when I hear problems like this, it's more of a kind of organizational leadership type problem, and leveraging those metrics as a hammer and not as a direction to help improve productivity by making the experience better and those types of things.
When we measure at the team level, not only do we increase psychological safety when we're transparent about the fact that, hey, we're in this and we're being measured as a team, but we also just get a more realistic picture. To Chris's point, I mean, if you have like a highly supportive member of a team who's spending more of their time mentoring, reviewing, to Chris's point, their PR throughput's probably not going to look great if we're focused on that one metric. But if you take that person off of the team, you better believe that the overall output of that team is going to go down, right? And so that's why not only does it increase psychological safety to measure at this level, but it also just gives you something that's more realistic and really more tuned to the business.
I would throw in Lorenko. Sorry, I butchered your name. But they make a really good point here. And I'd restate this a little bit differently. You don't do developer productivity to your organization, you do it with your organization. And nobody wants to be micromanaged, and nobody wants to be micromeasured. I can continue to just throw out these random statements, but it's totally true. It is a collaboration of working together as an organization, not an us versus them, whether it's the business versus engineering, product versus whoever, right? And if you don't have that collective view of what you're trying to accomplish and how you want to measure it, the outcomes that you want, and the incentives you're giving people, you're going to end up with really bad results.
Great. Thank you, guys. So we are at our time today, but I want to thank, our panelists, Chris, Nathan, and Justin, for all of their insights today and talking us through how to identify metrics that matter, drive that impact, thinking about those that are actionable. And for folks that we didn't get to questions here, as a reminder, you can continue to ask questions in the event chart on LinkedIn, and we'll do our best to answer those moving forward. So thank you all for joining us today, and again, thank you to our panelists.
Thanks,
Thanks
Ashley.
so much.
Thanks everybody. Thanks, Ashley.